review the resources to prepare you and to empower you to do your work in the community. Today you'll be hearing from a number of ACS speakers and staff. But before we introduce them, I want to say a big thank you here to the university, to ISASI for hosting us today, as well as to Carlos Arango for helping us organize this program. Without him, it would not be possible. So thank you. So I briefly mentioned that the American Chemical Society is really here to be a resource for you. It's a society of over 150,000 members, and we're lucky in Columbia here to have many local communities and chapters that are here to support you. So rather than me continue to talk about the American Chemical Society, I'm going to play a short video for you so you can see how the society can be with you as an undergraduate student all the way to your career in the sciences.
Last night, you had a dream. In your dream, it's the future. And you won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. As you begin your Nobel lecture, you take a moment to recognize the friends, family, and colleagues who believed in you. And you also thank the American Chemical Society for supporting you every step of the way. How did ACS help you to reach this point? Your journey with the ACS begins with a personal connection. It starts with the ACS On Campus event you're attending right now. Your librarian encourages you to attend, and you're already an active member of your university's ACS student chapter. And you're curious about how the ACS can help you be smarter as you look ahead to your career. At ACS On Campus, you learn about all ACS has to offer to its members, such as the career resources and the many events held across the globe. The ACS National Meeting grabs your attention. It's an opportunity to present your research and meet thousands of like-minded peers who share your passion for chemistry. You take action and you join ACS. You apply for and are awarded an ACS travel grant. At the national meeting, you submit an abstract and present your poster at an undergraduate research poster session. You also visit the career fair and take advantage of your member benefits by connecting with a career consultant. It helps you make the decision to pursue a PhD in the sciences and prepare for a future career in industry, your dream job. It is just the beginning of your journey with the ACS community. You are now a part of something bigger. You are a part of a dynamic organization that connects and catalyzes the global chemistry community. The people you meet at your first national meeting become some of your most valued lifelong connections. When you join the ACS, you join a community of over 150,000 members, including some of the brightest minds in chemistry. Within this community are student chapters, technical divisions, local sections, and international chemical sciences chapters. ACS connects you with like-minded peers in your neighborhood and around the world. Through your interactions with ACS members, you learn about the many resources available to you throughout your career. The free Chem IDP tool helps you map out an individual development plan to get you to the career you want. Throughout grad school, you rely on the tips and tricks in the Graduate and Postdoctoral Scholars newsletter. It helps you survive those years where you felt like you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You access the ACS website for a list of fellowships, grants, and awards that help you fund your research and get that PhD. While at a Preparing for Life After Graduate School workshop, you meet with an ACS career consultant for the second time to update your resume for your dream job. As your career advances, ACS helps you keep up with the global chemistry community. You get the important news in industry, government, academia, and professional endeavors through the weekly magazine, Chemical and Engineering News. You stay up to date on the latest research with the help of your dedicated librarian. They introduce you to research tools like Chemical Abstract Services SciFinder, a research discovery application, and you never miss a beat in your field with the research published in the 50-plus ACS publications journals. Like most scientists, you become an author of chemistry research, as well as a reader and reviewer. The ACS Publishing Center gives you everything you need as an author. You take advantage of a variety of resources that make your research shine. You master the peer review process with the ACS Reviewer Lab, and you become a regular reviewer for ACS journals. As your career matures, so does your relationship with ACS. You continue to publish research in ACS journals and take part in events as a member. You regularly apply for ACS awards and research grants. Eventually, you become an early career advisory board member of an ACS journal. As your research gains attention, you become the person everyone wants to meet. One year, you're invited to give the Kavli Foundation Emerging Leader in Chemistry lecture at the national meeting, where you speak to a packed ballroom about your latest research. The citations and awards pile up over the years, and you begin to look for ways to give back. Now, you're the one speaking to chemistry students at ACS On Campus events. You're the one participating in ACS mentorship programs. You're the one acting as a chemistry ambassador on the world stage, advocating for chemists globally, just as ACS does. Because chemistry isn't just a job to you, it's a calling. We feel the same way. The American Chemical Society is dedicated to advancing chemistry and its practitioners around the world for the benefit of Earth and its people. ACS, we're with you every step of the way.
I hope you were inspired by that video and were able to get a little bit more information about the American Chemical Society and the different programs and services that are available to you. When you become a part of the American Chemical Society, become a part of a community, whether that's as a member, an author, a reviewer, or even a SciFinder user. I want to mention that for attending today's ACS On Campus event, you do qualify for a 50% off discount off your ACS membership. So if you are interested in becoming a member of the ACS community or to take this journey even further past our ACS On Campus event today, please let one of the staff know, especially Gilmar Rosas, who you met at the registration and who will also be presenting later today. So let's get back to today's program. What you'll get today is exposure to the ACS editors. You'll get networking opportunities and tips for being better writers and communicators. And you'll also get tools for advancing your career. But to get the most out of the program, I encourage you to participate in today's sessions. So ask lots of questions. I know you guys get lectured a lot in your classes already. So we really want this to be a dialogue. So please don't be shy, especially during our first session. We'll be having a panel discussion. So I hope you jump in and join us. And then I also hope you utilize our resources, products, and services. What we'll be talking about today really can help you get to whatever point you want to be, whether that's as a published author, your first career, an internship. So we'll be exploring that today. And then, of course, we hope you join the ACS community, and whether that's part of your ACS student chapter, your local chapter here, or as a larger member of the ACS community. So here's a preview of today's schedule. We're going to kick off the afternoon with a publishing and science communications panel. We'll be going through the different stages of preparing a manuscript. As you go through the publishing process, it's kind of similar to how you would approach a paper or really any kind of way to present your research or a poster at a conference. So we'll be looking at from the perspective of publishing, but also how you can be a clear communicator and really be able to spread your research to the world. After that, we'll be looking at how to pursue a PhD in the US as an international student. And then we'll, in the afternoon, learn a little bit more about what's happening in your community and how you can get more involved, as well as some resources that you can use after the event. With that, I would like to introduce our speakers for the first session. Moderating our panel discussion will be Dr. Carlos Toro. He's a managing editor for ACS Publications. Joining him will be Professor Jonathan Sweedler. He's editor-in-chief of Analytical Chemistry. We also have Professor Monica A. Cota. She's the associate editor of ACS Applied Nanomaterials. Let's give them a warm welcome.
So I guess a way to get started is just a quick introduction other than You are the editor-in-chief of Analytical Chemistry and an associate editor. Tell us a little bit about what qualifies you to be here today.
Yes, I can use this or I can just talk loud. If you can't hear me, let me know. As it says up there, my name is Jonathan. I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. That's about 150 kilometers south of Chicago. And if you were to teleport yourself there right now, there would be a lot of white stuff on the ground. So it's nice and cold. So it's a lot of fun to be here where it's a little bit warmer. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Analytical Chemistry. It's the one of the top-rated or the top-rated journal in measurement science. With any publisher, we get about 6,000 papers a year, and we publish about 1,800 of them. And so one of the reasons I'm up here is I see a lot of papers, and I see a lot of papers that have good science that may not make it for other reasons. And so I'm going to try to share a little bit about how to write papers and how we can make some of these papers make it through. Let me just ask, I know maybe I'll wait a little bit, we'll ask who's published before, but we'll go ahead and continue the introductions.
Okay, my name is Monica. I'm from Brazil. So you probably heard me talking Portuñol, but I also have a confession to make. I'm not a chemist. I'm a physicist. I work in applied physics, and I think I should say that maybe Carlos will mention it later, but ACS is a little bit more than American and chemical. It's more like a global organization. And in particularly many countries, a lot of scientists in general are rushing to publish on ACS journals because they capture, I think, the flavor of science these days, where these boundaries between chemistry, physics, engineering, biology are not so well defined. So you reach your audience easier if you use this kind of publications. So as Carlos said, I'm associate editor. That means he's the boss. No, he's the boss, and then I'm lower grade. What it means, because the journal has an editor-in-chief, and who basically, thinks about the strategy of the journal and what it intends in achieving and how to do that. But of course, analytical chemistry, in his case, in applied materials, in my case, they are very broad and general areas. So in the portfolio of ACS, you'll find applied materials interfaces, which is the first original journal that deals with applied nanomaterials. Yeah. Oh, so thank you. And it was receiving too many submissions, and so many good papers were not being able to be published in the journal. So they decided to open a branch of related journals. So this is one of the newest journals in the portfolio. And randomly is the deputy editor. And I'm associate editor. That means I handle certain issues, certain subjects that maybe a chemist is not that fond of to deal. So the associate editor then has a more deeper view on certain subjects and can help the editor-in-chief in handling the manuscripts. Okay.
I did my undergrad in chemistry in your neighboring country, in Venezuela. Can you guys hear me without the mic? No? Oh, you need it because you are recording. Okay. I did my undergrad in Venezuela as a chemist, and I decided that I wanted to sort of pursue a career in chemistry, and I went to the US and got my PhD there. Did another 3 years of postdoc and decided that I have the passion for chemistry, that I love it, but I never saw myself as a faculty member, as a professor. So for the last 5 years, I've been involved now in scientific publishing, and basically my role within ACS is to coordinate together with the editors on strategies to move the journal forward. Where should one specific journal should have a presence or not? At what conference should we attend or not? And because I'm a trained scientist, I can go to conferences and talk to you guys, the practitioners, and understand the language and sort of, bring back that feedback to the journal and sort of, basically fulfill the needs. You as a community, of chemists, biochemists, physicists, biologists, we want to hear from the community, right? The journal should adapt to the needs of the community, and that's basically what I have been doing. I was in the lab not long ago doing experiments myself. So we understand that we are going to try to adapt this, to the needs of the audience. So just by a show of hands, how many undergrads we have in the room right now? Anyone doing a PhD, graduate school? Master, a master? Raise your hand. Be proud. Raise your hand. 1, 2, PhD? No. Postdocs? Probably not. How many of you have experienced writing a scientific paper, a scientific article? Raise your hand. Proud. 1, 2. Any faculty members? Professors? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. So that pretty much tells you where we are. All right.
Let me ask one other question. How many people, undergrads, have gone and given a poster at a scientific meeting? Even
Poster.
A local one?
Yep.
A local meeting. Doesn't have to be. There we go. I should ask one last question. How many are asleep? But maybe not.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. So let's start here. This probably could apply to a scientific paper, but also.
Yeah, poster. Let's go to the next one first. So this may be good. So what I would say is whether you're writing a poster or a paper, but we'll talk more of the paper. This is one of the things we're trying to discuss, but one of the things that I've noticed when working with undergraduates or graduates, when you tell them it's time to write a paper, the first thing they usually respond is, no, I need more data. Because collecting data is sort of easy, and when you say, now it's time to write, people get, they put it on a pedestal. They say, no, I'm not quite ready. Writing is hard. Writing is a little bit scary. It's scary for people with a lot of experience, and it's really scary the first few times. So it's worth thinking about how you would start writing your thesis, hopefully then maybe how you would start writing a paper, because the more you think about this in advance, the easier it is to do. And one of the reasons, of course, it's a little bit scary is that when you write, people critique. And that's always a little bit worrisome, right? You're going to write your paper. It's going to be a thesis. It's going to go to a committee. You're going to write a paper to analytical chemistry, and unknown reviewers are going to say what you did wrong. And so thinking about the process makes it a little bit easier. So maybe we'll turn it back over as we talk about the specifics, but you want to say anything?
You are going back after that?
No, we can go back or not, but this is, I
Okay.
just sort of want to
Yeah,
talk about the fact
yeah.
that this is the process we'll be covering.
Yeah, and particularly, I like to add the Latin flavor, because I'm a professor in Brazil, and the students always are more terrified probably than in US of doing that, because of the language of the barrier of the language. Even though I think you all speak English very well, I talk to many students and they speak English better than me. There's always writing, there's a structure of the language that comes to mind. So something that is psychologically understood is that you avoid doing that as much as possible. So that's why, Jonathan is saying, oh, I'm collecting more data. So you're just pushing away whatever you don't want to do. But that's necessary to stop at a certain point and organize your thoughts and think about what is the story you want to tell your audience. So a manuscript or a poster or whatever you present in a written form is a story. Okay? I'm going to go back to the other slide.
Okay. The only other, so we can go back to this. This slide is actually what you would see for any poster, any paper, title, abstract, introduction. One question I'll ask you, and of course, where would you start on writing? How would you start writing a paper? Somebody can.
Loud, talk. We're talking.
Results. That's a good answer. Anybody else have a? So, a lot of people, sort of look at this and say, "Oh, I'll start with the abstracts or the introduction." In many ways, it's easier to start with the. Well, you could say the results, and one way to look at that is the graphics. A lot of people like to think about it as a story and outline it and say, can I write a graphics for each one of the parts of this? And so that's sort of starting with the results. Many people start with the experimental section because that's the easiest. You did the experiments, you should be able to write them up. There's no right answer or wrong, except that probably the hardest one to start with is the introduction.
Exactly.
And so it's a little bit strange, right? Normally you'd say you start in the beginning and you move forward, but for something like this, you really want to outline it and think about the results or the graphics and what your story is, more than maybe the beginning.
Yeah, and particularly when you put the graphics, for example, you're already establishing the flow of the story, right? So I was using, what's the name? Little Red Hat, the girl with the hood, the red hood that goes. So you don't start with, you have to picture, a girl and then a forest and then the grandmama's house. So you have to picture what is the anchor of your story and then connect the dots, right? That's the basis, and the figures can do that. So once you establish the figures and you know this is figure 1, this is figure 2, this is figure 3, then you can more easily assemble the story. And the introduction is usually the last part, because it's the way you wrote everything you needed, then you have to pull down all the literature, all the objectives, everything that is already in the story at the beginning. So sometimes we always do it at the end.
Okay. Feel free to stop and ask questions at any time.
Sort of.
Were you going to elaborate a little more?
Only thing I was going to say, we already went over this, but again, get feedback. If you're writing a poster for the ACS national meeting and you have co-authors, talk to them. I always find it strange as a professor that the students didn't talk to each other, and there's 2 of you working together. So again, share your outline with your professor, your co-authors early, and get feedback, because that actually is something that helps. We can.
Sin pena, ¿no? Si tienen alguna pregunta y necesitan un poco de ayuda con la traducción, no se sientan con ninguna pena, ¿no? Pregunten y aquí lo hacemos funcionar. How to choose a journal? Should I submit my work in the first place that comes to mind?
Most of you haven't gotten to this point, so I don't know. Yeah. So one of the things to think about is there's different ways of evaluating a conference, a journal, or and some people say, well, the highest prestige journal is where I would go first. Maybe you have data and you want to go to the ACS national meeting, but you don't have enough. You pick the place carefully, and you think about the audience that you're trying to reach. So in publications, if you made some measurements on impurities in sugarcane and you were trying to figure out how this fits in, but the number 1 goal was going to be something about biotechnology, it may not fit the Journal of Analytical Chemistry. If the number 1 goal is you have a new way of doing these measurements, then it would. So think about the audience more than these artificial things like impact factor or others, because if you try to force your story to the wrong place, you want to go to a conference and it doesn't quite fit the audience, but you really want to go there, it doesn't work that well. So at least in the beginning, make sure you don't pick things like impact factor or the fact that your favorite conference is going to be in Orlando, Florida, and that's where you want to go, not where the ACS national meeting is in Philadelphia or wherever. You pick things based on target.
Yeah, because even if you manage to fit your paper, manuscript, or poster into the wrong spot, you won't reach your audience. So nobody that you care about, that means people working along that field or that will reproduce your results somehow to start something new inside you, they won't be there, right?
Yeah. Yes, question.
For example, in catalysis, ACS have catalysis A, B, and C. How do I know where to send my manuscript?
clarify that. ACS only has ACS catalysis. That's it. Catalysis A, B, and C is from a competitor. But it's okay. It applies.
Like, for example, we do have the Journal of Physical Chemistry A, B, and C, and each one covers a different part of the field of physical chemistry. And if you want to think about it, if you're doing one that's more biophysical, or if you're doing one that's very much theoretical, that defines. And to be honest, the way these offices work is if you submitted one, it goes to the main office and the deputy editor will get it. Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
makes a perfect connection, right? Because each journal will have a specific scope. And it is important to take the time to read what the scope of the journal is. But maybe I'll leave it up to you to maybe elaborate a little more.
By the way, it's a great question. Picking the journal carefully is important. Reading the scope is a great idea. As an author, I didn't always, I almost never, I never read the scope, okay? But what I did, I didn't. Now I'm an editor, I say you should read the scope. What I did do sometimes is if I was looking at papers in the journal, so if I'm going to submit to analytical chemistry, if I'm going to submit to the Journal of Biological Chemistry, not a ACS, I will make sure that there are similar papers published in there. If I decide that I'm going to do something in catalysis and I type in the keywords to that journal and I get 0 hits, either you're brilliant and you're starting a new field, which could be true, or it's the wrong journal. And I'm not saying I can guess either one. We love new areas, but think about it a little bit. So I do that, and then when I find them, I look at how long they are and things, and then once in a while I say, I don't know what that means. I don't read the guidelines except to look up that specific thing. So I actually have gone to the guidelines many times to say, how do you cite this? What's the format? But I don't necessarily read them. What I really recommend you doing is reading papers. They're all online. Reading the papers that seem to fit and see if you have anything published, similar. And one of the things that's good about that is you can sort of, eventually in the cover letter, you can say, hey, this is why I'm doing this. It's a follow-up on this other group's work that added this.
Good.
Yeah, just a reminder, you, in Brazil, sometimes we are very, careful. So we pick up 2 or 3 journals where we think our work fits, and we look at formats, because the formats of the manuscript change from journal to journal. And sometimes the changing format is significant and takes a lot of time, and you have to redo your manuscript. So that's something you should consider when you read the guidelines and pick up the journals you want to use.
Yep. Did that answer your question? Any other questions from the audience? Yes. That's a very good one. When is enough?
When is it enough? There's one of the things that's hard is to understand that question, and one of the ways that you learn the answer to that is to objectively think about what you've done compared to similar papers already published, right? So if you read the literature, then that gives you a very good idea. The one thing to think about is you don't, for example, we published 1,800 papers. Don't take the single exception that may be the most borderline minimum, say, I want to do that. Look at the average or look at what you think is a good paper and try to emulate there. It's a hard question to answer because it really depends. The only other thing I'll add to that is if somebody published something, you can't just do what they did. We're not going to publish it again. Each paper has to advance the field. I oftentimes see people saying, well, we did exactly what somebody did in 1972, and you published it then. Well, yeah, but things have changed. So look at what they've done. Think about what you're doing and why it advances. Different application, different molecule, if you're doing synthesis, some way. And if you can fulfill that, you're ready.
That was a perfect segue to tip number 4, to tell a story. When do you have the story, right?
Exactly. So to tell a story is, just to complement what Jonathan said, sometimes you have to make an assessment of how much you're advancing, how much your story is interesting, okay? I gave you an idea. So if you tell a story about the little girl going through the forest, and you start to describe all the trees, all the leaves, all the animals in the forest, your audience will be bored unless they are like some botanists who like to learn about trees, right? So you have to choose the story, the audience, and make them fit together with whatever the literature is already providing, right? So now you compare these and see, okay, how much knowledge I'm offering to my audience. Okay, I just showing that, this material that everybody's studying, I see this little tiny thing. So that will interest the botanist, that will interest in a more specialized journal, right? So if you're going to, more general audiences, you have to have more general knowledge. That means something more with more impact to attract all these audience. So it's a mix of these things that we have to learn how to do, okay? But anyway, you want to talk about data dumping?
Well, no, I was going to mention one other thing,
Okay.
and that is, they've heard me say this before, but there's many forms of stories, and I have said this at other places. I like to read mysteries. I really do. But mysteries have no place in a scientific publication. I do read papers occasionally that are submitted, and you get to the last paragraph, and you suddenly understand why somebody wrote the paper. It's a great thing to read at night when I'm falling asleep. It's inappropriate, it doesn't work for science, right? So scientific publications, you start with an abstract and you hit the readers over the head of what you did, and then you sort of hit it, you keep on backing it up with other data. No mysteries allowed. It's not really a novel. So the scientific story is a little different, but it is a story. But, if you like to be creative, that's fine, but that's not necessarily what we're looking for in terms of format. The rest, of course, is good. And I think we'll skip data dumping for now because we can talk about that later. But really explain why it's important, why we should read.
Perfect. I like this is going like an actual conversation. Any other questions from the audience? Every question is sort of leading us to the next tip in a very nice way. So
I'll start and then I'll let the expert. So language is so language is important. I'll actually take one step back further. If you're telling a story, then every paragraph has its place. And so I actually still do this, where I sometimes underline the topic sentence of each paragraph. That's what this paragraph is on, and I make sure every other sentence in the paragraph fits. And I want to make sure, even if I like what I wrote, that it's organized really well. The reason I'm telling you that is, of course, you're worried about common language pitfalls, and you're going to say, well, I'm not comfortable in English. It turns out, if you're not organized, it's not really a problem with English versus Spanish versus another language. It's a problem with the way you wrote. And so the first part is I want to make sure the paper follows that story, and then you can correct, the language problems. But if you actually are poorly organized, you can't go to a language editing service and have them fix it, because that's different. This slide is now talking about imprecise language, and this is actually surprisingly hard to get if English isn't your first language. These are some things that you might hear about. But what I would actually add is that the type of language you want to avoid is if somebody wants to make the results really good, they actually start adding, this is the best, we always came, it's novel, and you add superlatives. And that actually doesn't help your story. When I have my students, undergrad and graduates, send me drafts, I actually delete them all. It just makes it better. You don't need to say this is the best ever. And so think about how to write precisely and justify what you've written.
Yeah, you can always get some adjective of your work, but as I tell my students in lab classes, you have to see a criterion for that. Okay, so you can say that, this measurement is really good, the best of the world, but if you're not comparing it to anything, if you're not giving standards for that assessment, they are useless. They are subjective, and science is not subjective. Particularly hard sciences.
yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was sharing also with them at a different event that it is also the way we speak sort of reflects also the way we write scientific articles. I'm from Venezuela, right? So, I mean, I personally have a hard time putting sentences in a concrete way. I mean, I start, and and the idea behind these, and eventually I get to the point. My brother is still a physicist in Venezuela, so sometimes he asks for my help, right? Hey, I'm writing this article. Can you polish it a little bit? And when I read it, I mean, it does read like a novel. I mean, wonderful. But every paragraph, it takes like 3 sentences to eventually say what he actually did. So it's really a challenge, but scientific writing is precise. This is what I did. This is how it was done. So basically, avoid adding all these terms. Actually, Jillian put something on Twitter about calling your work elegant. What does that mean, calling your work elegant, right? I mean, you should avoid those kind of things. You should let the audience decide if your work is novel, superior, or elegant. Very important, the graphics, right? This is where the audience, the reader, is gonna pay the most attention. So, taking good care. Jonathan, you typically like to start with, yep.
I like graphics, so I like starting with this. Okay, yeah. So this slide shows a nice graphics. It has, from my point of view, everything is well labeled and it's visible. One of the common pitfalls is that you have a large monitor in front of you, you make this graphics, and when you're staring at it, and you look over there and you see this little piece that looks fine. Imagine your graphics not on a monitor in front of you, but in one column in the paper. And my students do this all the time, and when you do that, the axes become 0.1 font. I can't read them. So think about it from the point of view that maybe somebody, I know this is going to sound old-fashioned, might print your article in a black and white printer. Can you still recognize, what goes with where? Was it all color, or did you actually use, different shapes? And so draw your graphics. One thing to think about is some people, you might not like to hear this, will read your paper by reading the abstract and looking at the figures. Do the figures tell a story? And so that really helps. Spend some time. And then as a little plea, I sometimes say, a few % of the world is red-green colorblind. I've had people who write graphics all the time that everything is red and green, and then they complain to me as the editor, well, what's the matter with your authors? And so maybe spend a minute thinking about that, but that's a little maybe less important to start with.
Yeah, and just try, one thing that also, strikes the eye is uniformity of filling the space. So if you have more than one plot, like in this case it's an inset, but sometimes you have 2 plots or 3 plots in the same figure. So try to use all the space, being creative if you want. And the font size and all these details matters, because when you see something that you don't look good, you have this feeling that either the author doesn't have experience doing this, or he's sloppy or careless. And you don't want someone, you wouldn't like to have someone think about this about you.
By the way, if you're doing a poster, same idea. I find it interesting. Some people will do 6 graphics in their poster, and all 6 will use different font. If they're all in the same poster, it shouldn't really matter, but it does look a little bit strange. And so sort of try to make things uniform in a single manuscript or a poster or others, and actually print them out, if that's what you're doing, and I actually mean print them out at the size they're going to be on your poster, and then step back 4 feet. And don't use binoculars, see if you can read it if you're doing a poster. And if you can't, then maybe change and put less information on. That's actually really sort of important. I find it sort of hard when somebody has a poster and I have to walk up and go like, really, sorry, I can't see what it says. And so, my advice is,
and sometimes you have to remember somebody's walking slowly and looking at the poster, so he has to come this far, from the poster to check it out. It won't do it because there's a lot of people in the way and so on. So,
So again, this is more common sense. I don't know if you want to, but it actually is surprising how often it's not done, and this is true for all of us. This is professors as well as students. But really, the other thing is to pass them to somebody else to look at. You catch a lot of errors.
Exactly. Any questions from the audience?
And be careful not to use work that has been published in other places or has copyright issues, okay? Because these things are eventually bad for
So
you.
if you're putting, that's true if you go to the next one, maybe, you know, if you show this, if you're putting a pretty image, you can't just go to Google and find one and put it up there. Now, maybe that's not going to matter in a poster, but if you actually submit it, it does matter, and that happens surprisingly often. Most people think the web is available, but it's not.
Just, I guess, as a follow-up to that, it is important to also realize that this was your article. Say this image appear in your article, fine, and then you just reuse it in your next paper. Is that okay? Because I did the figure is mine? No, right? Once the article is published, the copyright is typically transferred to the publishing house. So if you plan to reuse it, it's fine. The appropriate citation and copyright statements need to be made. So be careful of reusing your own data without the proper citation.
And if you use Google, go to the images in Google, you can find there the information if that image is open for all use or if it's it has copyright issues.
But even if
Okay.
it's open, you have to acknowledge where it came from. End of discussion. So,
Yeah,
you know, don't.
exactly. I mean, for that matter, graphics must be original
Right.
whenever possible.
Yeah.
And this goes very well with this topic of the title. How important is the title of the poster, of the article, of the talk you're giving?
You know, I say this to my students. I've mentioned it at the other places. I thought was interesting is a fairly large study at looking at articles published in PubMed and how many citations they had. And the articles, they looked at abstracts, they looked at keywords, you know, and there was a little bit. Obviously, if you publish an article in Science, it gets more citations than in a different journal. That's a higher impact journal. If you're from, unfortunately, Harvard, you get more citations on the average. But one of the biggest things they came up with is a great correlation. The shorter the title, the more citations, right? It was a correlation coefficient of almost 0.7, but it was, you know, pretty high, you know, just number of characters. So chemists, scientists, you know, I guess are lazy or we're humans or whatever, you know, and we like shorter titles. So if everything else is the same and you have this really daunting 3-line title that describes exactly what you're working on and somebody's looking at the posters and they're walking by, that's too long, I'm not going to bother. And if it's a short title, they might stop and read it. And this is not only true of posters, it's absolutely true of your papers. So, you know, I dare you to try to read that first one. Synthesis, electrochemistry, spectroscopic characterization, and X-ray crystal structures of novel NAC-NAC. You just, and the other one is much shorter. So short titles. It's painful because long titles are easy. Just everybody gets to, you know, throw in 3 words or something. But shorter is better.
Yeah, just can you move to the long
okay.
title? And if you look at it there, it cures cancer. So when you write too much, sometimes you write what you shouldn't write. Okay, so be careful.
Well, there's 2 things. If that's really true, then the title only has to be I
It cured
cured
cancer.
All the other details are irrelevant, right? But no, it's so craft a compelling but short title. If you ever wanted to publish in journals like the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the USA, they actually don't allow a title to use words like this. Your paper will be rejected if you use the word novel, because they have been told the word novel is a legal thing, and they're not going to get in that. So short and words that matter, not words that you like. I actually have done titles that ask a question, but don't do that.
Any
Questions?
questions?
Which is not a title.
Yeah, just a reminder. Whatever works, many times whatever works for articles, in scientific articles, you can also make an analogy with books. You know, when you are in a bookstore looking for a book, think, next time you go to a bookstore and find a book that interests you, think why it's catching your attention, why you like it, where did you look at? So the same thing happens with the articles. You know, you look at certain places, and these are the ones who will define if you're downloading the paper, if you're reading it through or not. Okay?
Okay. Moving on. The
Let me start.
TOC graphics.
Does anybody know what a TOC or table of content graphic is? Have you seen them? So one thing to think about in a paper, just rounding numbers, maybe 1,000 people might look at the title and the table of content graphic. If you're lucky, 100 people will read your paper, and later on when we talk about supplemental information, maybe 10 people will go to that. And the way you bring people in the door is the advertisement of this nice, short and concise title with a really pretty table of content graphic. And I say that because if you're like most of us, what happens is you spend all this time doing the data, you spend too much time writing it, and then you're suddenly told you need this graphic, and you spend 5 minutes doing it, and you just don't want to do it. And yet this is really important. And if you're creative, it's really fun. Make a striking, visual, relevant table of content graphic.
Yeah, and my students, they have a lot of fun. They find new softwares because in Brazil we don't have money to pay, graphic designers. So we do all our pictures, our TOCs, and they enjoy doing this because it's a way to represent everything they've done, in an artistic form. It's something that sometimes you kind of relax after doing the paper by finding the right TOC. Okay. But it cannot be just a part of your paper. It has to show the main idea, main results in a single figure. And just to comment, this is something that calls the attention. And one of the reasons I went to ACS journals is because I kept reading them because of, the way they look. Because if you go to the physics journals, most of them don't have TOCs, right? So see how it works?
By the way, if you come up with a nice table of content graphic and you want to expand on it, all journals in the ACS have covers. And those covers are selected partly based, obviously, how the article reviewed. If it was really borderline, maybe not. But a lot of it is the visual impactful cover that you come up with. And that's sort of an extension of this. And so we invite people to submit covers. Now, one of the strangest moves, not just of ACS, but all of our journals are virtual. They're online. And yet, now, besides the front cover, we have a back cover and a back inside cover and a front inside cover. And I just think this is hilarious because it's online. What is a back inside cover of an online journal? I know but it actually does bring more traffic to your article.
Yeah. Questions? Yes, there's a question.
Blender.
So no, I have a big group and we have expensive mass spectrometers. We don't pay for a graphics artist. We don't have that. I mentioned it, I actually had one figure that we did with a graphics artist because we were writing a proposal and it was fun because we ended up spending $120 to design a pretty image for a proposal and it actually has been reproduced in like 7 reviews. So it probably is something we should do more often, but we don't do that. And so it's up to the creativity of the students and the softwares they pick. There are places that do that, but I just don't know if, especially the figures. No, we don't supply that. You will get feedback on them from reviewers that might say, I can't read the axes, I don't like this, make this bigger or bolder, and of course you should do that. But no, we don't supply graphics to help. There might be. And
sometimes the reviewers or the editors give you ideas about how to improve your TOC as well. But there's no direct support for that.
The exception, for example, is I have somebody in my journal office who will sometimes say, your cover is great, but there's 2 images on it that aren't very good, and if you made this bigger, it would be better, and we're interested in it, can you fix this? And so we do sometimes, if a cover is striking, provide some feedback because it just doesn't quite work, and so, but not really, unfortunately.
There is a question here in the front, Jen.
More than a question, is an issue to complement what the partner says. Today is very important, the graphical issue, and there are a lot of platforms or web pages that offer free courses in management of Illustrator, Photoshop. It's more the interest of the person to go further than the chemistry and start to learn to manage Illustrator, Photoshop, get graphic design, and all that issues. And that all that knowledge and give a plus.
Yeah.
So that's a wonderful point. I don't know if this university or some of you are from others. We actually have, 4-hour Photoshop or courses open to people to learn how to do something, or you can do the online, and you can become fairly good at some of these. And so the good news is I've had some fantastic graphics in my papers, and that's because my students have learned how to use all these platforms. But I'm very good at critiquing their efforts.
Yeah, and as I told you, it's something relaxing sometimes. Once you go through all the stress of writing and going through the feedback from other authors or your advisor, then you sit down and you start, playing with the tools. Sometimes it's really nice to do that.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move forward.
So you asked for where you go for help. The ACS doesn't tell you how to use specific programs, but it does actually have a lot of online information on how to write. This is one example. It says, Publishing 101. This is a picture of George Whiteside's. He may have more citations than everybody in this room combined. He has had a large group over many, many decades and has an H-index of over 150. One of the things that he said in this huge group is his group goes through 15 drafts of every paper. All 1,000+ papers his group has turned out. So it's really read it, revise, and keep on going back. And so this video is great, and there's a lot of others on how to write, how to get something written. And I really encourage you. ACS did a great job of finding some of the real well-known, amazing scientists and ask them for comments about how they write papers. And it's really kind of fun to view these.
Yeah.
Okay, so supplementary information. Everybody knows what support information is? Yes? That thing that comes with a click in a specific part of the web page. It's something that a lot of people do not look at or do not put much care into preparing, but there's one very important part of your manuscript. Jonathan's mentioned that 1,000 people download your paper. If 100 people will read your paper and 10 people will read their support information, these are the guys who are really into the details of what you did and will try maybe to reproduce and build on whatever you publish. They'll cite you. So these are the important audience you must address. So you have to be very careful what you do in here. Okay, so all the information that it's important to show the evidence you have, but doesn't fit in the flow of the story. Again, maybe it's too much describing a tree and it's not okay. You can use it here. But here, if a reviewer requests some information that you don't think it's necessary for the manuscript, but he wants it in a paper, you can also add it here, right?
The only other thing I'll say, which is hard for students to understand, but for faculty, the nice thing about it is if you put something in supplemental information, it's there forever. And, so it's tables and things. I always worry that somebody's going to ask me from data that the group generated 20 years ago. And, it's probably going to be on some kind of hard drive that I don't have access to anymore. If it's in the SI, it's there forever. And so I like the students to prepare all the data that went into the paper and put it out there in a nicely organized fashion, because then I don't have to think about losing it again. And there's a lot of reasons to do it. It's important.
Okay, so just a point of clarification, right? This just applies to papers. You don't have supplementary information for a poster.
Yeah.
So how to find that balance? How much data do you want in a poster, since you don't have that luxury?
Yeah.
I would say that's easy in the sense that if somebody wants more information on the poster, they'll actually ask you to send them the information.
Yeah.
And that actually happens a lot.
And
Yeah.
that's the goal of a poster, to make you talk to your peers in having feedback and exchange information. So the poster cannot have a support information because it will spoil the goal of the poster.
I have been told that you have to be more close to the angle of the camera. Any questions? No? So once I have written the paper, I need to convince the editor or the chairman of the conference to accept my paper or to accept my abstract. This is my one chance. What do I need to do?
By the way, this is probably not going to happen. You don't get a cover letter at the ACS national meeting.
I know.
the cover letter now I'm going to answer as an editor. I find this frustrating that people don't write cover letters. Now you finally, you've entered everything in it right before you hit submit, and you hit submit at the ACS Paragon, and it's not highlighted. You can't hit submit because it says enter a cover letter, and it's really annoying. So you just type in a few words, publish my paper. What I find annoying is I get 6,000 papers a year. I read the abstract, I read the cover letter, and I read a few things about it, and if it's a good paper that fits, I just send them to associate editors. If it's a paper that may not fit the scope, if there's something wrong with it, I may decide based on the fact that I've seen 50,000 papers that I don't think it fits the journal. It won't review well for some reason. I might ask an associate editor, and then we decide that we're going to reject the paper without external review based on our expertise. That happens actually more than 30%, almost 40% of the time. What I find frustrating is after I do this, the authors write back this brilliant 2 or 3 paragraph of why we should have published their work. And I'm annoyed because that should have been in the cover letter. Now, okay, I hide my annoyance and maybe we'll continue, we'll look at it again. But the cover letter is the chance for you to say, excuse me, editor, let me tell you why you should publish this. Don't put the abstract in. I just read that. Don't repeat the final sentence in the paper. Say, this is really important for the following. You could say, as you asked, this type of paper has never been in your journal, but this is why I think it would fit. So this is how you avoid that 30% of the time when the paper is rejected, because you get to say, excuse me, Mrs. or Mr. Editor, this is why you should publish it, and really use that. So that's the point of a cover letter.
And just to compliment, I don't know about you guys, but in Brazil, many times, to go to a meeting in another country, you have to get your funding from somewhere. And you have to make a cover letter to convince the guy who has, to sign your funding that you should go. So it's more or less not even for meetings. Sometimes you have to write that. And something I would add that I feel in my students in Brazil is that we have something like a low self-esteem for being in Latin America. Doesn't matter. You have to be able to write what is important in your work. Otherwise, that means you're wasting time, your group's time, and money to do something that is not important. And it's not the case.
Yeah. Comments and questions?
How many people have ever, looking at
The
us,
faculty members, yeah.
have written cover letters?
All
And
the
do you
time.
spend a lot of thought on these? Good.
Perfect.
That's what I want to hear. It's just a little frustrating when you get almost nothing. Please, I get them one sentence long. Please publish this work.
No, sometimes they just write, oh, this work is original, it has not been published, blah, blah, blah. Just a statement,
Okay.
Yeah.
And just a simple thing, now you have to submit the work. You follow all the rules. And the nice thing about ACS Paragon, it's actually very well designed. If you're missing something, you can't submit.
Yeah.
So not much else to say here.
And resources.
Yeah, and
And
just be
resources.
careful when you're filling in and providing the right information, all the details that are being asked for.
Yeah.
How many, well, actually, the resources, I want to mention only one because it's worth doing. Go back, and I'll let
Okay.
you do this.
ACS Reviewer Lab.
Yeah.
Right, so one of the important things is as we move forward in our careers, right, basically all we do in science goes through a validation process, right? Someone else has to validate our work, and that's basically the foundation of peer review. You send your articles to a journal, and eventually one of your peers will evaluate the work. And as you move forward in your career, eventually you become a reviewer as well. You're gonna make assessments of somebody else's work. We as scientists are typically not trained for that, right? We just get the paper, give me your comments. So ACS developed ACS Reviewer Lab, which is a free platform for everybody. You don't have to be an ACS member. It's free for chemists, physicists, engineers, young students, experienced faculty. It's for everybody. It was designed with the feedback of our editors and the community as to say, what are the things that we need to learn when we are writing a review? What constitute a good review? Right? I mean, the idea of the peer review process is to improve the science. There is typically an ethical component to peer review that we don't think about. I received a paper from a friend. Should I review it? Should I reveal that there is a conflict of interest in this manuscript? So I will encourage all of you to, take a look at the class. I think it's a 4-hour class. I mean, you can sort of progress, save it, put it away, go, do your things, come back to it. The good thing about that is that it happens to us very often at ACS. We get asked, how do I become a reviewer for ACS? And this is a perfect and easy way to do it. After you graduate, you automatically enter the reviewer database for ACS. And for example, I'm just gonna pick on you, right? If your expertise is catalysis, at the time when you start the course, we ask you, hey, what's your expertise? And you say, well, I'm an expert in heterogeneous catalysis or homogeneous catalysis, you name it. And then eventually you become, once you finish the course, you are added to the database, and eventually one of the editors of ACS Catalysis would say, hey, in Colombia there is this person with this expertise. I'm gonna ask him to review for us. So I think it's a fantastic tool. Any questions about that? Comments? Here are some additional resources for everyone to look at. Mastering the Art of Scientific Publication is just a collection of editorials discussing every part of the publishing process. And this is all we had. Yes, question?
So, well, hopefully it's not quite that bad. So it's an awkward thing in the sense that I ask reviewers and they write a review back. I follow the ACS ethical guidelines for editors, and I also follow, to the best of my ability, something called COPE, the Committee of Publication Ethics, that all the journals hopefully follow. And one of the things that's supposed to happen is that if a reviewer writes something, I am supposed to include the entire intact review back to the authors. The only reasons that I can say remove something is if it's really, inflammatory. They use, 4-letter words, as you would say, or they attack a class of people. Everybody in the United States is, whatever they would do. We remove that, and I would actually say that. But we don't remove anything. So I might say, if I, that you have 2 reviewers, one of them proposed a series of experiments that might take 12 years, and I wouldn't probably say it quite like that, please respond to the best of your ability, not undertaking more experiments, or I've actually written, despite the, the negative comments of reviewer 2, there are some actually positive statements that should be addressed. Please do these to the best of your ability. I'm willing to look at a revised manuscript that doesn't take into account all statements. So I try to give you some information. The reviewer is not always right. You can write back and say, these points were good and these were bad. One of the things to realize is that the reviewers don't ever make a decision on your manuscript. Some people think if there's a minor revision and a fail, that the vote would be, we should accept it.
Like soccer.
What?
Like soccer.
Yeah, like soccer, right? It's not that way. Instead, if the one that said this shouldn't be published because the same group just published something almost identical last week in this other journal, and I look it up and they're right, you're not going to be published, even though there was 2 minors, because those people didn't catch that. So remember, some people think it's a vote. Some people think the reviewers are deciding. They're informing the editor or the associate editor, and we, to the best of our knowledge, do that. Now, we make mistakes. I handle 6,000 manuscripts. We make mistakes. But the only goal, it's not politics, it's not anti from a region of whatever, it's not a type of, my only goal of doing this is to publish to the best of my ability, which it will be flawed, the best science I can. And that's what the reviewers are helping and everything, but I'm trying to make that decision. What is really good? And if you disagree with the reviewer comments because they really are bad, tell me. And I'll add one last thing, is if you get 3 reviewers that say this should be rejected, it's unlikely you're going to win an appeal. But if it's actually split or anything and you write a compelling reason, we overturn them. You know, I mean, I won't say it's common, but we do actually publish dozens of papers every year that went on appeal.
And just to remind, as you submit the paper, you usually are required to suggest a few names as possible reviewers, and also, you can also add names to persons that you don't want to review a paper with a very good and reasonable explanation why for that. Okay, so it doesn't mean we are gonna use all these names, but sometimes, you know, a few of them might be included in a poll, and that's why we try to get many reviewers, because sometimes a reviewer just have this, you know, bias impression on an area or a certain thing, a certain technique used, and you have to have more people evaluating your work.
Any other questions? Then, probably.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Please give our editors. Okay, so the next part of the talks today is going to be pursuing a PhD in the US as an international student. That was basically me back in 2005. So if I could get a show of hands, how many of you in this room are entertaining the idea of pursuing a PhD in United States or in Europe, somewhere else? That's good. Have you guys started the process? Yes, no? Don't be shy. Should I do this in Spanish? No? Doesn't matter. Okay, so some of you are actively thinking about doing this. It's nerve-wracking. Sometimes the process may seem not that easy. So just once you've made the decision, you just gotta go with it and plow through. So a little bit of, you know, where I came from, I already explained this. I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry from La Universidad del Zulia in Venezuela. I started as a computational chemist. Didn't get my hands wet or anything. I didn't run any chemical reactions. Everything was in a computer. After that, back in 2005, I decided to pursue my PhD in chemistry in the University of Central Florida in Orlando. I made a transition there. I became now an experimentalist doing nonlinear optics. So I went from just playing in a computer to dealing with a $500,000 laser. That was pretty nerve-wracking as well. After that, I then went ahead and did 3 years of postdoc at the University of Maryland, where I made another transition because in the PhD I was working in condensed phase. All my measurements were in solution. I was doing all the experiments in the gas phase. So that was the third change in my career. And then eventually, after 2 or 3 years of my postdoc, I realized that, as I said at the beginning, I love chemistry very much, but I didn't see myself running my own laboratory. I never saw myself having my own research group. So after 3 attempts at ACS, I eventually landed a job, and here I am. Fast forward 5 years, and here I am with you right now. So before I jump into what the process looks like, it is important to understand that maybe there are 2 main type of visas for graduate school or PhD programs. And please, I'm gonna say this in the most polite and nice way. Whatever I say today, don't take it as an immigration advice. The immigration process in the US is quite complicated. So this is pretty much my experience. So basically, there are two ways in which you can enter the US as a scientist. One, you apply for an F1 visa, which is to pursue academic studies, a PhD or your master. If you happen to be married, then your spouse then receives an F2 visa. And what happens with that is that since that person, your spouse, is your dependent, technically, since you are an F1 and that person is an F2, that person is not allowed to work under that status, okay? Same thing is for a J1. If your spouse goes with you, it's a J2, and that person is not allowed to work in the United States. That second category of J1 is for practical training. Basically, let me put it this way. If you get your doctorate here in Colombia or somewhere else, and you now want to do your postdoc in the US, this is the visa that you will apply for. With one little detail. When you apply for a J1, you are telling the United States that you want to go there as a training, but really your intention is not to move there. So they can give you this visa, I believe, for 2 or 3 years, and they can renew it. But the intention is that when you apply for a J1, you're technically telling them that your plan is to come back. If by any chance you want to pursue your life in the United States, then your country has to give you a waiver. And what that waiver means is that they will say, I don't know, Andres has no connections to this country. He's free to go. He doesn't owe us money. He doesn't own a house. He has tons of money in a bank account. He's free to go. Okay? After you pursue either an F1 or a J1, I mean, the immigration process is complicated. You could actually say, not really. I'm actually planning to stay. So that'll change you to another visa status, which is typically an H1B. And basically, you're telling them there, no, I do want to become a resident of the United States. And for that, you need a sponsor. You need to find a job. You need someone to be willing to say, Andres has the expertise that no other citizen in this country has. So we're willing to sponsor him to stay in this country and to provide back to the society. So for those of you that are currently in the process of applying or are thinking about it, you are probably aware of these. You have to take some specific test, the TOEFL, the test of English as a foreign language, and also the GRE. Basically, the GRE is an assessment of two main aspects. Your ability to understand the written English. So there is a grammar component, so to speak, and then there is a math part to it. Most departments, I think the total points you can earn, I believe, is close. Let's put it 1,000. I believe it's 1,000. So the English part is 500. The math part is 500. I'm not ashamed of that. I mean, most of us foreigners, we do pretty good in the math part. We have a harder time, obviously, in the written part. Most departments are okay if you get a total score of 700 plus. That will some of them will get you in. It is also important that there are GRE specifics to your area. There is GRE chemistry, there is GRE physics, there is GRE biology. Some departments in the US will require the specific one. So you have to study for those as well. The TOEFL, it's basically your ability to speak the language. You have to write an essay. You have to study really hard because the way the TOEFL it is designed, it's you take it in a computer and it start asking you basic questions. You know, what is the verb to be and the verb to do, and you start there. And as you answer correctly, the software, the algorithm starts to give you more complicated questions. If you start failing those, it goes back to some more basic questions. And the system is working that way. Once you pass the simple selection questions, A, B, or C, or D, then you have to write an actual paragraph, which you have no clue what the topic is going to be. In 2, 3, 1, boom, they give you the topic right there. And you have to write a full paragraph on the topic they gave you. Not to scare you, but that's the way how the system works. Now, as we have mentioned in other talks, not today, is these tests really don't measure how good you are going to do there. Some universities actually are realizing that, maybe the TOEFL will stay because you are going to learn and you're going to speak the language, but the GRE is not really a good assessment of how good you're going to be there. And just as a personal experience, right, I took the TOEFL, they accept me in the program. The university, once I got there, the university had its own English test, and I took it, and I failed miserably. And they told me that I wasn't ready to interact with students because I went there with the support of a teaching assistant. So basically, I was going to help a professor to teach a class. And because I failed that first test, they told me that I wasn't ready to have direct interaction with students. So I was then given the job of a grader, right? You guys have seen the movies and something like this. The professor is teaching a class with 300 students at the same time. So guess what? Someone has to grade those papers. And sometimes, I was helping to grade the papers. And it took me maybe 2 more semesters to actually become comfortable enough to retake the test and to start actually teaching class. Preguntas? Questions? No? Okay. So, yes, dime. Yeah.
There are 2 types of TOEFL, ITP,
Mm-hmm.
IBT, I mean.
Are those new? When I took him, it was just a 1.
One is for business and the other is for training, right?
Yeah. So at the University of Illinois, because most people come on a teaching assistantship, we actually want people to take an English test that requires spoken. And so the TSC or others test is spoken English. We're one of those schools that have realized test scores are sort of useless, but they're comfortable. They're comfortable because we can evaluate people and put them on a list based on scores. They're useless because that list has no bearing on how you'll do. So for all people coming in, the test scores are optional, but there has to be some way to grade you. Now, we still require the test of spoken English, and maybe you're going to go into some of those, or maybe not. But I just want to say, what works? Letters of recommendation are amazingly effective, especially if we have a connection with the person. And lastly, most undergraduates haven't published a paper. So if you've published a paper in a journal, second or third author, you're different. If you published a paper and have a poster at a meeting, and you list these things, we look at you very carefully. So the problem, of course, is if you don't require a test and the scores don't help, and you have nothing else that makes you stand out, what are we supposed to do on the admissions committee? So if you want to get in, I mean, this is kind of obvious, give us things to make us want you to come. And papers are good, presentations are good, anything like that. Now, obviously, I'll say one last thing. If you take one of those tests, you get a great score, well, then I would send it in anyway. It's optional, meaning anything that looks good, send in.
But my mean was sometimes some scholarships or some universities ask for one of those. And there are big difference of price.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that is true. Our campus scholarships sometimes do the more, do like test scores. So the department can admit you, it promises to support you as a TA, but if you did really well on one of these test scores, you're more likely to get a campus scholarship. I don't know what to tell you there. Some of them are expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have to say that even though I failed miserably when I got there, I was accepted under one of those scholarships. I don't know if they made a mistake or not. Here I am. So, yeah, no comment on that. Thank you, Jonathan. When you take those tests, the GRE and the TOEFL, well, back then when I took it, you were given the opportunity to send your results to 5 universities. And as a personal experience, again, and I'm realizing that I'm running out of time, that I said, look, I want to go to the US. Someone told me, hey, there is this great school in Central Florida, in Orlando. Why don't you apply there? And that's where I applied, and I got accepted. And I realized that I totally missed the opportunity to say, why not try other programs, apply for other programs? So keep in mind that when you're thinking about going to grad school or a postdoc in the US, look at your options, which is where I'm going to go next. So considerations before you go, the programs, so the type of research, teaching, and internships that are available. There is no secret, right? In the US, you have the big name schools, Harvard, MIT, Caltech, University of Berkeley, all those universities. And there are other universities where also a great amount of wonderful research is being done, but they just don't have that name, right? So think about that. Maybe as you read papers, you recognize that you found this amazing paper, and there is this professor at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, that is doing wonderful things in analytical chemistry, and that's what you want to do. So you start exploring Jonathan's lab, and what are they doing? And you really go, because eventually it's going to be your future. You choose where you want to go. How big is the group? That is important. I did my PhD and my postdoc with groups that were very small, 5, 6 members at maximum. There are other groups with 20, 30, 50 members. The dynamics changes quite a bit within those groups. And again, what kind of support and opportunities they have for international students. The location is important. If you want to stay in a sort of weather close to what Colombia is, then I guess you don't have too many options. Florida or the very south of the country, Texas or Arizona. Things to consider. I mean, not everybody's meant for the winter of Chicago, right? So those are things that you also have to keep in mind. The cost of living, Los Angeles. Those are very expensive places to live. Ability of public transportation, housing. Am I going to live on campus? As a graduate student, am I going to be able to afford to pay rent, on my own? So, at least in science, is my experience, when we are accepted to a graduate program in the US, typically you get a salary, you get a stipend, because you are going to go there as a teaching assistant. You're going to help a professor to teach a class. You're going to help in a laboratory. So the compensation is enough for you to live decent as a graduate student. You will have enough for food. But where I'm going with this is location makes a big difference, right? I mean, if you put $100 in your pocket I'm just gonna talk about my experience in Orlando, it's not the same experience. It's not the same if you just have $100 in Boston, right? Because the cost of living is different. As I said, opportunities for your spouses and your family. You gotta think about that. Do you already have a family? Are you married? Do you have kids? Are you gonna bring your whole family with you? Those are things that you have to keep in mind. And importantly, the logistics. You have to start early. As Jonathan said, recommendations letters are important. If someone is going to write a recommendation letter for you, give them enough time. If the deadline for your application, and those are pretty clear in the university, you know when everything has to be submitted by. If you need recommendations letters, give the person, I don't know, about a month. About a month is good. I mean, you're asking very busy people to say something great about you. So give them the time to think, to put some thought into the letter. Don't ask them, hey, tomorrow is my deadline. Can you write something for me? The visa requirements, right? I mean, it is important to have all that. They will ask you for your grades here in the university. All that has to be translated by an official translator, so to speak. I mean, not everybody can translate, right? You need the seal of the Department of State that person is an actual translator. Your grades have to be translated. Your diplomas, if by any chance you've won an award here in Colombia, all that is great. It supports your application. All that has to be translated. So all I'm saying is that it takes time. As well, the financial aid and other funding. As I said, most of the time when we applied for these programs in the US is under a teaching assistant role or some sort of scholarship. Pay attention. What do I need to do? What are the requirements in order for me to qualify for that scholarship? ACS has also developed some help in this arena. There is a website where we list the different opportunities and what to do as well. Please check it out. There is also a graduate and postdoctoral chemist magazine, which you can find career advice and awards and fellowship. Keeping sort of making sure that you are aware of the latest, and that's why I said that with this short conversation, I do not mean to claim to be an expert in immigration, because the rules almost change constantly depending on who's in the White House changes, rules can change. So make sure that you are aware of what the rules are, what the requirements are as you move forward in the application process. And that's all I had. I mean, I'm more than happy to, I'm finished earlier, so pick my brain. I have been in the US for 15 years now, so I've almost experienced all the steps. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I went through the entire transition of my very first day in the US. Someone said, here's the room that we have arranged for you to live in. You're gonna pay $300 of rent. That's in Orlando, quite cheap. And I cried like a baby that night because I said, what did I do? Why am I here so far from my family? It's an emotional toll, but I do not regret any moment of it. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And maybe if Jonathan and Monica, since they have a ton of experience also, as you are part of like evaluating, those applications. Jonathan mentioned a little bit what makes you stand out, but you only have, how many spots per semester per year?
So, that's actually the biggest point is that we have more applications than spots, and we have to somehow, I would say, quantify who's good and who's bad, but I don't really trust the way we quantify because test scores don't matter. But some of my colleagues absolutely think test scores are great, others don't. I am in a big department. It's actually in the top 10 in the United States and has one of the biggest chemical sciences enterprises, if you haven't heard of it. So we get lots of applications, and it's too many for me to look at. So we have associate editors, except now I get the ones that are in measurement science, and somebody does organic chemistry, and somebody does that. And we discuss them as much as possible. But why you? That's the whole point of the application. And you have a chance to write a personal essay. You have other chances, hopefully to build up the resume, and just fill it up with reasons that would be, why you? And that's really scary to think about. But the essays do matter. Telling us why you think this would be important for your career, and that type of information is good.
Yeah.
I will add one thing. Some universities don't work that way. They basically say, I don't, I'll give an example. ETH doesn't have any admissions process. There is nobody ever admitted. Now, I just lied, except I didn't. Renato Zanobi, a friend of mine, gets to decide, I want you. And once he decides that you're in, you're in. So you write to the professor, and the professor then decides that he has a place and he likes you, but maybe not you. And it's all done at the individual group level. And once you get in to that group, and they've said it, then the department admits you whenever that happens. And so there's two extremes. The Illinois version where you cannot join a group until after you're in, and you get 3 or 4 months to decide who to work with. And the ETH, I'm not saying either is right or wrong, but I have sometimes people contact me saying, I want to work with you. It's like, well, apply to the school. Hey, what? That's not the way it works there. So you have to know something about that. They're all different.
Yeah.
And also, something, it's the same as talking about the first papers. Try to add some flavor that you know where you're applying. Sometimes we get letters, people applying to university. You can read that it's a general letter that applies to any university in the world. Okay, so it's really good that you made an effort to know, to show that you want to go to that place specific and why you want to do and how you're going to be, a part of it. So
Yeah.
try to show this and not make some general application letters telling how you were wonderful or how, smart you are or something like that.
Or if you do mention the university, mention the right one. I don't personally take it personally when somebody does that. Obviously, you're far away. But some of my colleagues and some others do. University of Chicago has said that's automatic reject if you use the wrong name in the cover letter.
Oh, wow.
So if you say Northwestern instead of University of Chicago, and you apply to the University of Chicago, if that person is right, you're out. Or both are universities in the city of Chicago, but one has that name. So
Yeah.
if that really is true, then make sure you get the right name. Because that would be really silly if your career was determined where you didn't go because you just did a typo and had the wrong name.
Yeah. Questions? Yes. What was the hardest part of the application process? Well, I guess I'm going to speak for my very personal experience. Was exactly to take the TOEFL and the GRE. Not only because what it implies, right? You have to study for the GRE, you have to study for the TOEFL, but at the same time, logistics. I was born in the plains in Venezuela. That's where I did my high school. And then I went to another university, the second largest city in Venezuela, Maracaibo. Well, it turns out that these two tests are only offered or were offered in the capital, in Caracas. So there was only one certain time, one certain day of one certain month that I had to take it. So to coordinate that with the application process, that was very stressful for me. But that was my very personal experience, making sure that I had all my dogs lined up on time. It was very nerve-wracking, but especially the GRE. Any other questions? Yes? So the cultural impact it was, again, I guess all the pieces come together, right? So I landed in Orlando. Oh, no, first thing, right? I studied English. I thought that I was ready. And not to pick on any nationalities, right? But I'll do it anyway. This is not politically correct, but I'm gonna say it anyway, right? So my flight was to Miami. And I would say maybe 75% of the immigration officers in Miami are maybe Puerto Ricans or Cubans, right? So they do speak Spanish. So I got there, and the immigration officer throws this at me, I don't know what sentence in English. And I was like, oh, what? It's like, and I was like, oh, my 2 years of studying English are good for nothing. I cannot even understand here the Cuban immigration officer who was asking me something. So that was the first shocking experience, right? Someone that I thought from my culture was giving me a hard time to get in. But the diversity, the cultural diversity, at least in sciences, it's pretty big. You go into a lab and you realize that you have a group that is made up of people from Asia. You have group members that are from India, group members that are from Europe. So in that sense, we all feel like we are pretty much on the same boat, so to speak. The cultural shock is what I was, to be expected. Like, I was far away from my family. I guess the shock of the difference in food, but those are to be expected, right? But I personally never felt any sense of rejection because where I was coming from, because it's just a huge pile of culture. I would say at least in the physical sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, you have people in graduate school all over the world, so it doesn't feel like they're picking on you because you are from Latin America. I'm not saying it may not happen, but it didn't happen to me. Any other questions? Am I out of time? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. So we're now going to take a coffee break and have some treats. And I encourage you to stick around, ask us questions, ask our speakers questions. And we're going to return at 3:30 for the next portion of our program, where I'll be looking at our ACS student chapters as well as your international chapter here in Columbia, which I will say are excellent opportunities to network with professionals as well as academics who may have similar experiences to what you've seen from Carlos. So I encourage you to stick around, see those. We'll also be talking a little bit about career resources and some things that you can take with you after the event. So we'll see you again at 3:30. Thank you. And if I can ask speakers and staff to stay in the room for a photo. Thank you.
your start time. Yeah, okay, let's do it. Do you want to start? I tried like separate. Okay. Bueno, hola, buenas tardes, gracias por regresar. Ahora vamos a tener una presentación con mi colega Becky Miller que va a hablar sobre
soft skills, that kind of thing. We came to Brazil and Peru a couple of years ago and did what was called the ACS Boost program, and so that was bringing top scholars, top graduate students in chemistry and chemical sciences together and providing some additional training that was sponsored by FLAC, ACS, and the United States State Department. And so we try to do different events like that. About over a year ago now, we co-sponsored with 3 other chemical societies conference in Mexico, which a couple of you may know, Laura Gill and Fabio, who are in the student chapter, came to that, presented posters. They met with student chapters from everywhere in Latin America, about 6 or 7 countries. There were students from South Africa there, and researchers from everywhere in the Americas, Europe, Africa. And so we try to do a lot of those kinds of things on a broad level. And we do similar things with other national chemical societies. The content kind of varies just depending on what their priorities are, what our priorities are. Some societies are more interested in sponsoring, say, research or outreach, where they want to have scientists like you guys share your love for science and your passion for chemistry with the community, with little kids. And so that's something that we work on a lot as well. It's kind of hard to see up here, unfortunately, but we have a couple of official ACS communities around the world. And these are groups of ACS members who have really decided that, you know, we feel a little bit all over the place, but we know that there are a lot of ACS members in our country and our region. So we're going to start a chapter, an International Chemical Sciences chapter, to get together, to share resources, to network, to really maximize the relationships and the power that we have as chemists focused on the priorities of the American Chemical Society. And so within the last couple of months, Colombia started a chapter, a professional chapter, and we have a couple of the officers here today who will speak to you about that. But there's 23 chapters around the world now, and again, they're really just ways to get together and to network, to meet new people, to get new ideas, to expand your community around chemistry within your region, within your country. And so I'd like to invite a couple of our colleagues up today to share themselves, because they will tell you much better than I will.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Primero que todo, súper alegre ver tanta gente y lo que el capítulo de estudiantes ha hecho aquí en ICESI, lo que pasó ayer en Bogotá, que básicamente fueron también capítulos estudiantiles de la Nacional, de los Andes, y hubo mucho movimiento. Y pues se nota esa gran, digamos, como efervescencia que está ocurriendo con los grupos de estudiantes de química y a través de ACS On Campus, y eso es muy chévere, yo los felicitamos. Y bueno, lo que acaba de decir Becky, pues básicamente estamos inaugurando hoy el capítulo profesional de ACS, y pues las personas que estamos aquí paradas hemos estado trabajando durante el último año para lograr esto, y finalmente pues tenemos un capítulo profesional de ACS aprobado para Colombia. Carolina es nuestra tesorera. Carolina ya ahorita se puede presentar rápidamente sobre lo que hace. Ustedes conocen al profesor Giovanni, que es el vicepresidente, y yo, Fernando Luna, pues soy el presidente del capítulo profesional Colombia. Y pues bueno, hemos estado hablando con algunos de ustedes y la idea es trabajar en grupo en pro pues de la química y de la misión que tiene ACS, que es mejorar la vida de la sociedad a través de la química, básicamente.
Vale, yo antes de comenzar, yo quisiera también que nos acompañara el profesor Carlos Arango. porque volviendo un poquito a historia, como que los primeros intentos de lograr el capítulo, nos acompañó también el profesor Carlos Arango, igual también es miembro actual de la ACS, entonces, y creo que es su advisor del capítulo. Sí, sí. Hola, Nicolás. Bueno, un poquito de mí, yo soy Carolina Lizarazo, yo estudié química en la Universidad del Valle, soy caleña, como la mayoría de ustedes, como casi todos creo que acá. Aquí hay un cuasi caleño. Ahora trabajo en la Universidad de los Andes, soy un químico que tiene un perfil un poco diferente, yo hice maestría en educación y en mi cargo actual de coordinadora académica no dicto clase, entonces ahí se demuestra un poquito la versatilidad que tiene la carrera de química. Bueno, finalmente, antes de esto, con los chicos del capítulo estudiantil de Uniandes y un poquito más atrás de los primeros contactos con ACS fue algo que se llama el Festival de Química, que ahorita me estaban contando que ustedes tienen como una iniciativa parecida a eso, entonces pues es como una invitación a que podamos trabajar juntos.
Bueno, muy bien, muchas gracias y buenas tardes a todos. Creo que a la gran mayoría ya los conozco, a otros no. Pero bueno, aprovecho para presentarme. Mi nombre es Giovanni Rojas, soy químico también, al igual que Carolina de la Universidad del Valle, con doctorado en la Universidad de la Florida. Y bueno, la intención de este capítulo obviamente es promover la química a nivel nacional, utilizando pues la plataforma de lo que es la ACS, de la cual nosotros hemos sido miembros gracias a la experiencia que tenemos a nivel internacional en nuestras respectivas universidades donde nos graduamos. El día de hoy ha sido una muestra muy clara de qué es lo que buscamos nosotros con este capítulo de la ACS, que no fue fácil realmente organizarlo, es un proceso que ha durado más o menos 2 años, en los cuales hemos tenido altibajos, pero bueno, finalmente se logra. Pero por ejemplo, la conferencia que nos daba el doctor Carlos hace un rato son conversaciones que tenemos nosotros normalmente en el día a día con los estudiantes y que hemos tenido experiencias muy similares, y que definitivamente el traer al doctor Carlos acá y presentarnos exactamente esas mismas experiencias pues nos abre las puertas y la motivación para seguirlo intentando, ¿sí? Y definitivamente para que a través de ACS, ¿cierto? Y a través del estudio de la química pues realmente esa internacionalización que queremos con ACS efectivamente llegue. Entonces tenemos un programa bastante amplio a lo largo del año para diferentes actividades. El día de hoy es el inicio, es una pequeña muestra, y definitivamente es la apertura ya oficial, como lo decía el doctor Fernando, la apertura oficial de ese capítulo Colombia de la ACS.
Pues bueno, gracias por su asistencia. Pues como digamos como el profesor a cargo del Students Chapter, pues ya hemos empezado algunas actividades, nos reunimos periódicamente y pues hay unas iniciativas que empezaron desde los colegios para montar algo así como el Festival de la Química, y pues es una muy buena oportunidad para incentivar a los estudiantes más jóvenes a que empiecen a ver la química como una opción profesional y eventualmente para enriquecer, no sé, el Chapter Colombia o las asociaciones de química colombianas y las carreras colombianas antes que nada. Pues también tenemos a nuestro presidente acá del Student Chapter, que es Nicolás. Nicolás de pronto les puede dar un poco más de detalles sobre lo que es este chapter de estudiantes.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes, pues la mayoría ya me conoce, mi nombre es Nicolás Londoño, soy estudiante de química de 7º semestre y pues actualmente soy el presidente del chapter estudiantil de la Universidad ICESI. Realmente lo que estamos buscando este año con nuestro objetivo principal es lograr primero generar aquí en la universidad como esa semillita en todos los estudiantes de química, porque pues sabemos que somos muy pocos y realmente lo que queremos es que siendo así seamos un poco más unidos y poder así llevar a cabo pues muchos proyectos que con el profesor Fernando Luna tenemos que hablar también acerca de las agendas, cómo se cruzan, qué podemos colaborar, y también invitar a los estudiantes de química a la Universidad del Valle, la Universidad de Santiago, que creo que aquí hay, para que también en conjunto aquí en Cali podamos trabajar en pues diferentes actividades. Actualmente el capítulo cuenta con, somos 23 miembros, esperamos ser más aquí en la universidad y pues estaremos haciendo reuniones a lo largo de todo el semestre, igual por las personas que tal vez no puedan ir o pues por motivos académicos no se puedan reunir con nosotros. Y cualquier cosa me preguntan, yo estoy siempre disponible y también pueden hablar con el profesor Carlos Arango, que es el Faculty Advisor. Y sí, eso, muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Before we go on, I just want to follow up with, I think, probably some things that they've said, but before you guys go down, does anyone have any questions for them while we have them standing up here already? Questions about the ACS Columbia chapter, about student chapters, about working in ACS within Columbia or on a university campus? Okay, that's fine. They'll be around for the rest of the afternoon and happy to talk with you about anything that you want. So as Carlos and Nicholas told you, we have our student chapters that are all around the world. We have about 2,000 chapters in the United States and 60 chapters in 25 countries around the world. ISESI was one of our first chapters, so it's really exciting to be here and to be sharing this with you all today. So if there are those of you from the Valle or from other universities who want to learn more, first I encourage you to chat with Nicholas and with Carlos and with the other student chapter members here, because they're really the experts. But if you're curious about how to start a chapter, what some of the opportunities are, I'll be around as well today. Please come up and talk to me and ask questions. We're happy to answer, discuss anything that you'd like. Student chapters for ACS, it's really a way for us to make sure that we are supporting scientists at every level, from when you start, when you decide to major in chemistry, you're pursuing it as your career, all the way up through getting your degree, moving on to, say, a PhD or a job, and all the way through your career. It starts really at that undergraduate and graduate level, and that's where the student chapters come in as a mechanism to support what you're doing, whether it is providing you resources and opportunities to present research at a conference, to from helping you write that abstract, right? I have my research, I know it's good, but how do I put it all in one paragraph, basically? How do I present it to an audience that they're going to read it and understand why it's important? We can help you with that. We can help you, we have our national meetings in the United States. Not the greatest title because there are a lot of international members that come, but that's a great opportunity as well for students to present research to 10, 16,000 people at those meetings. And there's a lot of stuff going on, but a lot of people come to poster sessions, and a lot of our students have made really good connections with, say, a future PhD advisor, someone who has a job offer for them eventually. And so that's a great opportunity as well. Conferences around the world, like the Atlantic Basin Conference on Chemistry that I had mentioned earlier. Student chapters are also an opportunity to really leverage the power of the chemistry students in your university. For example, it's one thing if Nicholas says, you know, I really would like Carolina to come and give a talk at my university because I read some of her research and it's very interesting to me, and I'm going to invite her to come. And she gets the email and she says, well, I'm busy. Like, I have a lot going on. I live in Bogota. Like, why would it's one person asking me? But if she gets an email from the ACS student chapter of, you know, a dozen or so members saying, we are a chapter, we're working together, we're putting on a full day of events, and we really want you to be our speaker, our keynote, our guest speaker from Bogota to come in and talk to this group that's really excited about chemistry. That's going to be a much stronger request and much more powerful for her. And it means that the students get to benefit from that as well. Our student chapters also tend to do a lot in terms of coordinating research. If there's something of an area of research that maybe you're interested in, but isn't happening as much in your university for whatever reason, the student chapters sometimes will reach out to other groups. Say our chapter in Alexandria University in Egypt. They've said, you know, we don't really have a lot of equipment in our university, so we're going to create an exchange with a group in Cairo where students can trade and kind of one goes to Cairo, one comes to Alexandria, and they learn and they experience a different lab, a different kind of setup, and they use the chapter as the power to really make that happen. Our student chapters also tend to go out into the community a lot, and as a number of people have said, things like the Festival de Química, other outreach events. Maybe you go to a local park one day and you take some simple experiments and you invite a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and they come and you just do experiments and show them science makes up our world. It's things that are very complicated, but it also can be presented in a very simple way. And having all of your lovely faces telling them that tends to go over a lot better than more of a in school kind of way. It becomes fun. It becomes a passion rather than just a class, for example. So as I said, if you're interested in learning more about student chapters, about how students can benefit from ACS, whether or not you're in a chapter, please come talk to me. My colleague Gilmar, who's outside as well, has some great information about that, and we'd be happy to chat. I think that Carolina and Fernando took all the information off this slide in their talk, so I won't spend much time on it. But that's better anyway. So the Festival de Química we've discussed. We also have some other global events around chemical ethics, so convening groups of chemists to discuss the things that, you do an experiment in the lab, and then what's the impact in the world? Is it hurting people? Is it helping people? Usually it's not all one or the other. So ACS brings together researchers around the world to think through some of these topics and figure out, what do we think, what should we do, and influence research in that way. We also have a Green Chemistry Institute that runs a summer school every year where they bring researchers together, and it's something you can apply for on their website to learn more about green chemistry and how to implement that more in your own work, and the national meetings, as I had mentioned. We also occasionally get involved in science and human rights issues. So we've talked a lot of you said that you're interested in going abroad for your studies or for a job. And sometimes there are challenges to this, right? With the visa question, or things come up that make it difficult to do science across borders. And so when there's really a compelling scientific reason that a researcher's case that a researcher is having an issue, their case should be looked at. ACS will try to help in whatever way that it can. And as Carlos had mentioned, we're not the State Department in the U.S. We don't have any ability to influence decisions in that way, but we certainly have experience with a lot of global researchers, and we try to provide that and help people understand what you need to do to cross borders in doing research and science effectively. The International Center is the main site on our website where you can get information for scientists outside the U.S. And so it's something that I encourage you all to look at, start there. It's a really good kind of starting point. There's really a lot on our website, but the International Center is a good step one. It has information about grants and opportunities and competitions that people can apply for. It has science-related news from around the world, and it tends to be a great place to find jobs and internships by experience level as well as country. So you could say, for example, I'm an undergraduate in my second year in Cali. I'm a graduate student in Korea, whatever it is, put it in there, and it'll help kind of narrow down what some of the opportunities are. In addition to going to the website, which I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's kind of hard to remember to go to a website regularly, right? So the Global Chemistry newsletter is our international activities group's way of bringing that information directly to your email inbox. And so the subscription information is up there, and it's also on our website, so you don't need to write it down necessarily. But it's really just a kind of monthly report on all things international related to ACS. So this is a copy of the December newsletter. There's information about the International Year of the Periodic Table kickoff, which was about to begin, things that ACS is doing, that some of our partner organizations are doing, and information about some of the IUPAC Young Global Observer Program, different opportunities that we think people would be interested in, or that we know people have told us that they'd like to hear. So that's a good place to start as well. Kind of covered this. Yes, these are your slides. You want to come back up and go through 'em? All right, let's have Nicholas back up.
Bueno, como ya les estaba comentando, ya les comenté ahora, el ACS Chapter de la universidad es una organización que tenemos los estudiantes de química, pues de aquí de la universidad, y lo que pretendemos es desarrollar pues una variedad amplia de actividades para, primero, fomentar el estudio de la química, segundo, y pues mejorar la experiencia universitaria de todos acá, y tercero, pues podernos proyectar a un futuro, como lo están diciendo ahorita pues, Becky y los otros conferencistas. Actualmente el Faculty Advisor es el profesor Carlos Arango, pues yo soy el presidente, tenemos a Mateo Alderrutén, que es el vicepresidente, Daniel de la Hoz, que es el secretario, pero que no se encuentra aquí en este momento, y Alejandra Vega, que es la tesorera. Bueno, las actividades que tenemos planeadas para este año, tenemos primero la del Día del Químico, que la celebramos el 31 de octubre, y pues ya a finales de semestre tenemos que con el capítulo ir planeando acerca de qué vamos a hacer. El año pasado se hizo algo muy chévere y pues la idea es como superar ese evento que se logró el año pasado. Este año también es el Año Internacional de la Tabla Periódica y lo que buscábamos era que en esa misma semana del Día del Químico poder celebrar pues hacer como diferentes eventos o diferentes stands acerca de la tabla periódica, que es una de las cosas que vamos a hacer. El National Meeting, que básicamente es para los estudiantes que ya tengan proyectos adelantados y tengan unos resultados por publicar, para que suban sus abstracts hasta el 18 de marzo. Y las Olimpiadas de Química, que es una iniciativa que unos colegios de aquí de Cali nos propusieron y que nosotros queremos seguir adelante con ella, que es organizar un evento para que los estudiantes de pues, bachillerato de la ciudad de aquí de Cali puedan participar. Lo que queremos hacer es, mediante esas Olimpiadas, fomentar también, como dijimos, la visibilidad de la carrera aquí en la ciudad y demostrarles que realmente las ciencias químicas es algo muy chévere para uno estudiar. Pues esto es un ejemplo del Fall National Meeting al que fueron Laura Gil y Fabio. Ellos actualmente están haciendo pasantías en Estados Unidos, ellos ya se van a graduar. Y pues eso fue una foto del Día del Químico el año pasado. Pues ahí estamos varios de nosotros. Otra foto del Día del Químico. Y actualmente, pues hasta ese día éramos como los miembros que habíamos en el chapter estudiantil y pues sí, básicamente es eso.
Gracias. Could we just have all of the students or faculty who are part of the SSE student chapter raise your hand? Okay, so these are the people. If you have questions, all of them are the experts on this. Okay, so before I turn it over to Gilmar for the resources presentation, any questions? English or Spanish is perfectly okay. Sure. The process to create a new chapter. So it's pretty simple, mostly because, as I said, the point of ACS chapters is to support you all. So we don't want it to be some complicated, really hard thing that you have to do, right? You have enough homework assignments and other things that you're doing. This is supposed to be easy. So to start a student chapter, you need to have at least 6 student members of the ACS. So that could be an undergraduate student and or a master's, a PhD student, any student at your university. You need to have at least 6 who are members of the ACS, and 1 faculty member who is also an ACS member who will be your faculty advisor. And when you have those members, you go to our website, which is in your bags. There's an orange and purple flyer, www.acs.org/international student chapters. It's on the flyer. And you go there and you can fill out an application. The application is really very simple. It just says, who are you? What school do you go to? What university? Who are your members? What are your ACS member numbers? Check yes, you want to start a student chapter. That's really all there is to it. There's also, for new student chapters, if you're starting one, we have a student chapter starter grant, which is $300 US, and that can be used really for anything that you need to do to start your chapter. So it could be that you want to help pay for the first year of membership for some of those student members. Maybe you want to have an event where you have some coffee and cookies and rent a room, and maybe that costs some money, and so you can use it for that. You could make t-shirts or bags or whatever you think you need to get started. That's a grant that is available on the website that's there to help you as well.
Más o menos quiero explicarles algo. Normalmente, ¿cuánto vale la membresía anual de un estudiante de pregrado? Vale, ¿y hoy está? Está como a $3,75. Entonces, si ustedes tienen las 6 personas acá, o bueno, los que sean miembros de otras universidades, creo que es el momento de inscribirse porque su primer año está muy económico, realmente. Hasta hoy. O sea, si Gilmar se va, ya. Es más, creo que el proceso no tienen que pagarlo ya, sino que tú les envías un email después para pagar. Bueno, es que para comenzar el capítulo estudiantil sí necesitan 6. Yo quiero aclarar algo más que puede crear confusión. Lo que pasa es que como se llama capítulo profesional, eso no quiere decir que ustedes no hagan parte de nuestro capítulo. Somos solo uno, sino que tenemos como diferentes.
Los capítulos estudiantiles alimentan el capítulo profesional.
Bueno, ahorita pues, cuando tengamos el mini capítulo, volvemos a decir, pero de finalización del capítulo, pero o sea, lo interesante es que es una sola marca. O sea, es ACS, y ACS responde a unos valores, a una misión, entonces somos uno solo, solamente que de forma organizativa pues se separan en esto.
Yo,
Pues, por ejemplo, nos sentamos en un estudiante, pues no son las mismas que tiene un profesional, entonces también por eso se divide, pero todos somos lo mismo. Eso sí hay que tenerlo claro.
yo quería terminar diciendo que además en la del Valle hay profesores que son miembros de ACS que podrían ser su faculty advisor, porque es la otra parte que ustedes necesitan. Entonces, la profesora, cuando yo estudiaba, la profesora Luz Marina Jaramillo decía que ella era miembro de ACS, entonces, ¿sí? Además, y ustedes tienen ASECUP, ASOCESCI, o sea, ustedes tienen montado como espacios donde esto puede facilitarse. La misión general de ACS es atraer, es esa, tiene que ver con eso.
Y demostrar cómo la química ayuda al bienestar de las personas en toda lo que llaman, como dicen en inglés, de chemistry enterprise, todo lo que está relacionado con la química. Y si uno va y identifica, digamos, algunos objetivos específicos de ACS, para ACS ahora es una inmensa preocupación el impacto ambiental que está ocurriendo. Entonces, ese tipo de cosas, por ejemplo, lo que ya dijiste, pues, claro, ver cómo podemos impactar en la sociedad. Y también eso pues es como un ciclo virtuoso de atraer más gente hacia la química. Lo que dice Daniela también, o sea, es que eso hay que entenderlo como una sociedad, ¿cierto? O sea, por eso usted paga una membresía. O sea, no todo el mundo es parte de eso hasta que usted paga. Usted empieza a ser parte de un club de gente. Y lo más importante, como dice Daniela, realmente de desarrollo profesional es que tienes, o sea, si tú te presentas con un profesor como él que estaba diciendo ahora, alguien de Berkeley, lo que sea, y tú dices, es que yo no soy Pepito Pérez, sino que yo soy Pepito Pérez, miembro activo de ACS. O sea, pertenecemos a la misma comunidad. Eso claro que tiene unas ventajas de desarrollo profesional únicas, ¿cierto? Entonces,
Y yo quiero recomendarles que ya que la del Valle queda tan cerca y la Santiago queda tan cerca, se crea una sinergia bonita entre los estudiantes. Igual todos somos unos. El año pasado, hacia octubre, los estudiantes de la Nacional y los de los Andes por primera vez hicieron un evento juntos. Y les voy a contar como una anécdota. Estábamos pidiendo fondos y nos los negaron, nos dijeron no porque está muy encima. Pero dijimos, mire, es la primera vez que los estudiantes de química de 2 universidades de Bogotá se están uniendo. Y eso hizo que faltando como una semana para el evento nos dijeran, bueno, sí, realmente eso es la primera vez que se crea. Entonces, recuerden que hay química en la ICESI, hay química en la Santiago, hay como 20 universidades de química en Colombia y estamos como para apoyarnos en el gremio.
Gracias. I only understood some of that, but I think they were really good questions, and thank you all so much for jumping in. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation and turn it over to my colleague Gilmar to tell you a little bit more about the resources that ACS has for students.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Nada más voy a tomar algunos momentos ya bien rápidos, nada más para decirles más sobre qué viene con la membresía con el ACS y me voy a enfocar más en los recursos que tenemos para los estudiantes, porque en realidad hay mucho y tenemos cosas para cada paso de tu carrera. Entonces, el primero, bueno, lo voy a hacer en inglés, perdón, y después si tienen preguntas me encuentran ya afuera, ¿va? So the first one is in Chemistry Magazine. So it's a digital magazine that's focused on, everything that has to do with student issues. There's stuff, going from applying to grad school, looking for a job, or just, trying to figure out how to balance, your classes and social life. If you've had, any questions, regarding to like your school life, In Chemistry probably has an article on it. So it's a really good place to go for like, sources for information. And again, it's available digitally as well. And so in a similar vein, we have undergraduate and postdoctoral chemist magazine. So it's basically the same thing. It's a digital magazine. And this one is really focused on those of you who are in graduate school right now. So if you're getting your master's or your postdoctoral. And once again, it's really focused on questions that you would have in that stage of your career. So if you're wondering about, how do I apply for a postdoctoral in the US? Or how do I, balance the challenges of pursuing a master's degree? They have articles all about those sort of things, and this is available to you online. As part of ACS membership, you can also subscribe to Chemical and Engineering News, which is like the leading chemistry magazine, and we're really proud to offer it in Spanish as well. So we're really thinking that this can increase access to some of you who really are wanting to receive this in Spanish. We also have webinars in Spanish as well. We have about 7 a year. They cover a really wide range of topics, and we find that oftentimes our student chapters pull a lot of their content for you guys from these. Another program that's available to you as part of the ACS membership, it's something that you could get involved in, and this has become like a really big trend in the field lately, is how to practice chemistry in a sustainable way. So the ACS Green Chemistry Institute sort of is pursuing that goal, and as part of the ACS membership, that's something that you can get involved in as well. So a big part too of ACS membership is supporting you in your job search. There's a big suite of tools available to you to do just that. ACS Career Navigator is really like a big program with a ton of different tools to help you on things ranging from resume writing, interview skills, and personalized consulting. College to Career is also another piece of that, and it's sort of this place where you can go online and look at different chemist profiles. So today you heard from some of the speakers that we have today. And that's also another place where you can go to look at profiles of real-life chemists. We have over 50 in the program, and you can really look at like where they went to school, what their career paths were like, and to sort of give you an example of where to go. ChemIDP is also like another really big tool that we have for those of you that maybe don't really know the direction you want to take in chemistry. It's a really good way to sort of assess yourself and try and find, the things that you're really good at, or maybe the weak points that you have, and really help you find, different areas that you're passionate about, and guide you towards, where ultimately you'll find fulfillment in your direction with chemistry. And as we mentioned throughout the program today, there's a ton of internship opportunities, summer jobs. Especially if you're looking at grad school, we have a lot of resources specifically towards how to do that. We had a presentation earlier today on how to pursue one of those in the US. And also we have a lot of study abroad programs both in the US and globally. Applying for grad school, right. So we have an entire website dedicated to how to plan for grad school online. We're going to send these slides out after this event, and I'm also happy to connect with you personally and direct you there. But yeah, we have the website details every step of how to. So and that's actually free. It's not part of a membership, but that resource is available to you, and we'd be more than happy to connect with you and do that. And a big part of ACS membership too is connecting to the larger ACS organization. So once again, we call it the American Chemical Society, but in reality, we're like a global organization. We have national meetings, regional meetings, career fairs, and these are all really available to you. We have a lot of grants available, especially through the student chapters, which is what Becky was talking about. There's a lot of money to get you guys to go to these events, and we find that our members find them really useful because they're able to connect with peers from around the world, engage with editors that they might not otherwise have access to. So, yeah, we think it's a pretty good opportunity. And then as part of one of our divisions, the CAS, they have the SciFinder program, which is another program available to you as an ACS member. And this is really focused on finding the top graduate students in chemistry. And in the past, they've been really involved in really big advancements in the field. And this is just another example of the constantly changing and developing programs that ACS has as part of a membership. And once again, you heard from Carolina today. Here in Columbia, we have a professional chapter that's just getting started. We also have a ton of student chapters, and I think you heard earlier today about the benefits of creating a student chapter. It just really, I think, strengthens your connection to the organization. It makes you feel like something that's larger than yourself. And I think it's a really good way to hear about opportunities from the ACS, especially if it's coming from your student chapter. And again, we do offer a lot of funding regarding student chapters, like the starter grants and travel grants. And again, these are just some of the student chapters we have in Costa Rica, and hopefully you're interested in starting a new one. And again, you can connect with us on social media. If that's like a big tool that you can use, it's a really great way to stay up to date with the ACS and learn more about what we're working on and sort of new stuff that's coming up. And lastly, I think this was also touched on today, but advocacy, I think is a really big part of a lot of chemists and their careers. We have a lot of programs that support those kind of directions. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities both in the US and abroad where you can connect with other people that are maybe in elementary school, and you have the opportunity to talk to them about why you're so passionate about chemistry. Science and human rights is also something that we talked about, and it's something that the ACS is really involved in, so that's another piece that you can become a part of as well. So anyway, yeah, it's just a quick run through of the resources, but again, there's just a really lot available. We have things available at every stage of your career, whether you're an undergraduate, postdoc or master's, and also like while you're a professional. So if you're interested in any of this, please come find me after the presentation today. And like Carolina mentioned, we're offering a 50% discount today on membership. So if you're interested, please come talk to me. And now, just to close out the event, this is Shannon O'Reilly.
Thank you, Gilmar. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. And I just want to say a couple words before we go. First of all, thank you again to our host at ECESI for bringing us here today, and to all of you for attending. I hope we were able to learn a little bit more about the publishing process, as well as what you can do internationally in internships or even with graduate programs, and that you take some of this with you on your way. I want to emphasize too that we're called the American Chemical Society, but as Monica said earlier, it's truly an international society. It's what makes us richer, and it's what makes us more connected. When we say 150,000 members, it's really 150,000 members around the world. And we're so happy that here in Columbia, you've developed such a beautiful community of people through your chapters. And all of us are very excited to see how you guys grow, and we're always here to support you. So know that this is not the last time you'll be seeing us, ACS On Campus or the American Chemical Society. So please stay in touch with us. And I know we mentioned too, Orlando National Meeting is coming up. So if any of you are attending, I myself will be there, as well as a number of staff as well. So please stop by the ACS booth. And with that, you will be receiving an email after this event with a survey. If you could complete that survey and just let us know how we're doing, and if there's other things you would like to see at the event or just with the American Chemical Society in general, we'd love to hear from you. And you'll also receive a participation certificate upon completion of the survey. Behind me, you'll see a link to the ACS On Campus website. You can access many of the resources that Gilmar just showed you on this site. It breaks it out by publishing, careers, communication. So it's a really great resource where you can find things like ACS College to Career, which has some of those planning for graduate school resources, as well as the ChemIDP app, and even things like the ACS Reviewer Lab, which are free courses to walk you through the publishing process. So I urge you to check this out, and we'll also be emailing you some links to resources as well. So thank you so much for attending today. Again, my name is Shannon O'Reilly. I'm the program manager for ACS On Campus. We hope to see you again soon, whether that's as a member, writer, reviewer, SciFinder user. So thank you. Should I play the music?
Al terminar este evento, íbamos a declararnos oficialmente inaugurados y vamos a contarles lo que les contamos como en varios momentos hacia el final de las charlas. Entonces, queremos los tres a declarar oficialmente inaugurado el capítulo profesional ACS Colombia. Además, contarles que escogimos Cali porque queremos darle también importancia a las ciudades como capitales de departamento. Y agradeceríamos que nos tomaran una foto.
Y, pues yo no sé, ya hemos dicho eso varias veces, aquí ya se fue mucha gente, pero o sea, yo creo que tenemos que hacer un esfuerzo enorme por aprovechar este espacio para romper barreras. Yo creo que todos somos conscientes un poco cómo funciona nuestra sociedad colombiana, ¿cierto? Estratificada y todo ese tipo de cosas. Entonces creo que parte del trabajo es, tanto de estudiantes como, digamos, llamémoslos profesionales, es romper esas barreras y unirnos. Caro ahorita lo decía, o sea, estas tres universidades están muy cerca, o sea, físicamente están muy cerca. Cali es una ciudad donde es muy fácil encontrarse. Entonces, pues parte de la labor es eso, es realmente generar conexiones significativas entre la comunidad química, ¿vale? Y también, porque lo hemos hablado, nuevamente lo vuelvo a reforzar, como ya dijo Caro, parte de lo que queremos hacer es realmente llevar la química a donde a veces no está llegando. El país es mucho más grande que lo que usualmente son sus capitales, ¿cierto? Entonces, también esperamos recibir apoyo de ustedes en ese propósito de poder llevar la química mucho más allá, en lugares recónditos, tratar de tener, digamos, apoyo justamente al profesor que de pronto nunca ha tenido un apoyo o la oportunidad de compartir con gente que sí ha tenido oportunidad de compartir. Eso es, bueno, entonces cualquier cosa ya saben, nosotros estamos súper empoderados. Ok, bueno, sí, ya, o sea, los tres estamos súper empoderados y todos los que nombramos acá, y Ceci es muy importante, por ejemplo, con el capítulo. Carlos también es ahí, tiene supremamente mucha experiencia internacional, conexiones, todo ese tipo de cosas. Entonces, nada, para adelante, vamos a aprovechar y a construir a partir de hoy muy claramente. Tenemos una página en internet que es acscolombianchapter.org, que está en construcción, pero pues próximamente tendremos allí información, y ese es un sitio, digamos, digital donde podemos confluir todos. Por ejemplo, la idea es, de una vez lo digo, y creo que ya hemos hablado de eso, pero si hay fotos que hayan tomado el evento, por favor, a través de Nicolás podemos canalizarlas para compartirlas y subirlas ahí claramente en el website, y que aparezcan claramente los capítulos estudiantiles que se están formando.
Y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, como siempre, a ustedes. Shannon, thank you.